The silent beginning the evening was glowing with soft lights. The red carpet outside the luxury event stretched like a river of fire, and cameras flashed from every direction. Famous actors, rich businessmen, and politicians walked proudly, smiling as reporters shouted their names. It was one of those nights where people came not only to celebrate, but also to be seen. Then quietly a tall figure walked toward the entrance. He wore a simple black suit, nothing too flashy, nothing screaming for attention. It was Keanu Reeves. His steps were slow, calm, and almost humble. He did not arrive with an entourage. He did not carry a powerful presence of arrogance. Instead, there was silence around him, as if the world held its breath for a moment. But when he reached the doors of the event, something unexpected happened. The guard at the entrance looked at him, frowned, and then raised his hand to block him. "Sorry, sir, this event is private. You are not on the list." The words were sharp, louder than they needed to be. People nearby turned to look surprised. After all, everyone knew who Keanu was. For a second, silence grew heavier. The guard stood firm, his body language cold, while other guests walked past, whispering and even smiling with curiosity. Some wondered if it was a mistake. Others thought maybe Keanu had shown up uninvited. And then the flashes of cameras began again, but this time not out of respect, out of scandal. In that moment, anyone else might have argued. Anyone else might have pulled out a phone, made a call, or demanded respect. But Keanu did not. He simply looked at the guard with calm eyes. There was no anger, no pride. He gave a small nod as if to say, "I understand." His hands rested loosely at his sides. The crowd expected him to fight for entry. They expected him to push, to insist. Instead, he stepped back slowly, letting others pass him by. His silence was louder than any words. His humility confused people, but also made them uncomfortable. Across the street, a small group of fans had gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars. They saw what happened, and their hearts ached. One young man whispered to his friend, "Why are they treating him like this? He is Keanu Reeves." His friend shook his head, unable to answer. Inside the event, music played and laughter filled the hall, but outside, something more powerful was unfolding. Keanu, still standing quietly near the entrance, did not leave. He did not storm off. Instead, he slowly walked to the edge of the red carpet, where a group of fans pressed against the barricade. Their eyes lit up when he approached. Without a word, Keanu smiled and greeted them. He shook hands, posed for photos, and asked how their night was going. The guard, still standing tall at the door, looked over nervously. Cameras captured every moment, and soon, people on social media began sharing what they saw. A world-famous actor denied entry at a luxury event, yet choosing to spend his time with ordinary people. The fans laughed, cheered, and some even cried. One woman holding her daughter's hand told him softly, "You don't know how much this means. We waited hours just to see you." Keanu bowed his head gently, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "Thank you for waiting. I am the lucky one tonight." Those words spread quickly, carried by posts and whispers. While the elite inside the building clinked glasses and raised toasts, the true story of the night was unfolding outside. A story of respect, humility, and kindness. And as the flashes of cameras grew brighter, one thing became clear. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any argument, and kindness shines brighter than the grandest event hall. Whispers in the crowd as Keanu stood with the fans, more and more people gathered around. The street outside the venue began to fill with energy. Some of the guests inside who had just entered started to look back out the glass doors, curious about the commotion. The reporters who once ignored the fans now pointed their cameras at the growing crowd. The guard at the door shifted uncomfortably. He had been told to follow the rules, to only allow those whose names were on the list. He had not expected that the man he turned away would stay, calm and collected, treating strangers with more warmth than the honored guests inside. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake, but pride kept him silent. A boy no older than 12 pushed through the fans with a small notebook in his hands. His clothes were simple, a little worn, and his shoes were old. He looked nervous, almost afraid to approach. But when Keanu saw him, he bent down to meet him at eye level. "Hey there," Keanu said gently. "What's your name?" The boy's voice trembled as he replied, "David." Keanu smiled. "Nice to meet you, David. What's that you have?" The boy slowly handed over his notebook. It was filled with sketches of faces, little drawings of superheroes, and rough doodles of movie scenes. I draw," David whispered, "and you're my favorite actor. I wanted to give you this." The crowd went silent for a moment, watching. Keanu carefully took the notebook, flipped through the pages, and his eyes softened. He looked at David with genuine admiration. "These are amazing," he said. "You have real talent." The boy's face lit up, his nervousness melting into joy. Keanu then did something unexpected. He pulled a pen from his pocket, signed the notebook on a blank page, and handed it back. "Keep this," he told David. "One day you'll have people lining up to get your autograph. Don't stop drawing." The fans cheered, and some even wiped away tears. Across the street, a reporter who had earlier rushed inside came back out, phone in hand, streaming live. The video quickly caught fire online. Millions of people watching from their homes began to comment, shocked not by the luxury event itself, but by what was happening outside its doors. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was different. Guests laughed loudly, glasses clinked, but soon murmurs spread through the room. Phones buzzed with notifications, and people whispered as they saw the live videos. Some frowned, others shook their heads. One actress muttered under her breath, "They denied him, and he's outside with fans." It was not the story the organizers had planned for the night. Back outside, Keanu continued to greet every fan as if they were the only person that mattered. He listened to their stories, posed for pictures, and gave soft words of encouragement. His presence turned what had begun as a humiliation into something unforgettable. But then, the unexpected grew even deeper. An elderly man, frail and leaning on a cane, pushed through the crowd. He looked tired but determined. When he finally reached Keanu, he lifted his eyes and in a cracked voice said, "I never thought I'd meet you in person. My wife and I, we used to watch your films together. She passed last year, but tonight it feels like she's here with me." The street fell silent again. Keanu stepped closer, gently placing his hand on the man's shoulder. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said softly. "She's with you. I'm honored to meet you both." People around them felt their hearts tighten. Some cried quietly. The cameras captured every second. In the distance, the city lights shimmered, and traffic slowed as more onlookers stopped to see what was happening. It was no longer just a group of fans. It was a movement building in real time, a moment bigger than the event inside. And while the world online began to take notice, those standing near Keanu knew one thing for sure. Something powerful had begun, something that would echo far beyond this single night. The storm inside the glittering event hall, the air was thick with music and chatter. Chandeliers sparkled above the polished floor as guests enjoyed fine wine and whispered deals. Yet beneath the laughter, there was an unease that grew stronger by the minute. Phones buzzed on tables, screens lit up, and conversations paused as people saw the same images. Keanu Reeves standing outside, surrounded by fans, smiling with humility after being denied entry. At first, some tried to brush it off. "Maybe it's just a mistake," one businessman said, waving his hand. "He'll be inside soon." But others frowned, shaking their heads. "No," an actress replied, her voice low. "The guard blocked him. It's all over social media." The event organizers, seated at a long table near the front, began to panic. Their carefully planned evening was being overshadowed by something they never expected. One of them slammed his phone down, muttering, "This is turning into a disaster. The story isn't about us anymore, it's about him." Back outside, the crowd had grown so large that cars slowed down to see what was happening. Fans held up their phones, reporters jostled for space, and streetlights bathed everything in a golden glow. Keanu, standing calmly in the center, looked neither proud nor angry. He was simply present, listening to people, laughing gently at their jokes, and giving comfort when they shared their pain. A mother with 2 children stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "My kids grew up watching your movies," she said softly. "Tonight, they'll remember this more than anything." Keanu knelt to the children's level, shook their hands, and told them, "Be kind to your mother. She is the real hero." The crowd erupted in applause, the simple moment touching hearts more than the luxury inside ever could. In the hall, whispers turned to tension. A well-known director leaned over to the organizers and said, "Do you understand what's happening out there? He's creating history. Every guest here will be remembered for attending an event. But Keanu will be remembered for choosing the people." The organizers quickly sent assistants outside, whispering orders. "Get him in here now, fix this." But by the time they arrived, the scene had shifted. A television crew had arrived, cameras rolling. News channels were broadcasting live. Reporters spoke into microphones, describing how one of the world's most beloved actors was denied entry, yet chose to stay with his fans. The story spread like wildfire. Millions online were glued to their screens, flooding timelines with one question: how could they turn him away? The assistants tried to push through the crowd, calling out, "Mr. Reeves, please come inside now, the organizers are waiting." But Keanu shook his head politely. "Thank you," he said, "but I'm fine here." The refusal shocked them. They expected him to jump at the chance to correct the mistake, to reclaim his place inside. Instead, he chose the sidewalk over the chandelier-lit hall. The cameras caught his words, and within minutes they spread across the nation. Hashtags exploded, videos reached millions, and everywhere people spoke of his choice. Some called it humility, others called it defiance. But everyone agreed it was powerful. Inside the event, the tension boiled over. The organizers argued, some red with anger, others pale with fear. One muttered, "We spent millions on this night, and he's outside making it worthless." Another replied bitterly, "No, he's outside making it unforgettable." And in that moment they realized the truth. The story was no longer in their hands. The nation takes notice as the night deepened. The glow outside the venue grew brighter, not from chandeliers, but from hundreds of phone screens capturing every second. Reporters' voices blended with the cheers of fans, while traffic slowed to a crawl as drivers leaned out of their windows, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The story was everywhere now. Across the country, television anchors interrupted their scheduled programs to report on it. Clips of Keanu with the little boy and the elderly man played again and again. The image of him kneeling to speak with children, smiling softly, was now plastered on every major platform. In small living rooms, families sat together, watching in awe. Some shook their heads, saying, "He could have gone inside, but he stayed outside with the people." Others whispered, "That's real respect, that's real humility." On college campuses, groups of students gathered around laptops, inspired by what they saw. One student said, "Look at that. Denied at the door, but he didn't fight for himself. Instead, he gave everything to the people who love him. Who does that anymore?" Inside the luxury hall, the sound of music no longer covered the tension. Guests stared at their screens more than their glasses of wine. Many whispered about leaving, about joining the crowd outside. The organizers, red-faced and frantic, knew they were losing control. A well-known producer stood up suddenly and said aloud, "I didn't come here for champagne. I came here to witness greatness, and right now it isn't in this room, it's out there." With that, he walked toward the doors. Others followed, quietly at first, then in small groups. By the time the clock struck midnight, more than a dozen high-profile guests had left their tables, stepping out into the night air. They were not welcomed with cheers like Keanu was, but they stood among the crowd, silent witnesses to what had become something larger than a single mistake. Back in the street, a woman in her 30s held up her phone, her voice trembling as she streamed live. "Look at this. He was denied entry, but instead of anger, he gave kindness. Instead of pride, he gave humility. This is the story the world needs tonight." The chat on her live video filled with comments from people across the nation. "This is unbelievable, true respect, the kind of man we need to look up to." Keanu himself seemed unaware of the storm his silence had created. He listened patiently as fans spoke, as if he had nowhere else to be. He took pictures, signed shirts, and gave soft, steady encouragement to anyone who approached. To him, it was simple. He was giving time to people who valued him. But to everyone watching, it was something greater, a lesson unfolding in real time. The guard who had turned him away now stood frozen at the door, his face pale. He had not expected his simple words, "You're not on the list," to turn into a firestorm. Every reporter who passed glanced at him, some even filming his nervous expression. Shame clung to his shoulders like a heavy coat. The organizers huddled together, whispering furiously. "We need to fix this before it destroys us," one hissed. "Call him inside again?" Another shook his head. "He won't come, not now. He doesn't need us, we need him." But outside, the truth was already undeniable. The luxury event that was supposed to celebrate wealth and status had been forgotten. What people remembered, what people shared, was a man standing quietly among ordinary people, teaching the world about dignity without ever raising his voice. And for the first time in years, the nation was united by something simple, something rare, kindness without condition. The world begins to listen by the next morning. The story was no longer just local news. It had spread far beyond the city. International outlets picked it up, running headlines that carried the same shock. Keanu Reeves denied entry at luxury event, chooses to stay with fans instead. On social media, clips of his soft words to the boy named David, his gentle comfort to the elderly man, and his humility with mothers and children were watched millions of times. People everywhere repeated the same phrase. "He could have walked away, but he stayed." The world was watching, and the message was clear. The luxury event, meant to showcase status and power, was invisible now. All eyes were on the sidewalk, where one man's silence had become a louder voice than any speech inside. In classrooms, teachers brought up the story as an example of humility. In offices, workers played the clips during breaks, some wiping their eyes while others nodded in respect. On talk shows, hosts debated what had happened. One said, "This was no accident. Sometimes fate shows us who truly deserves admiration." Another replied, "This is why people love him, not for his fame but for his humanity." Meanwhile, the event organizers faced a storm. Sponsors demanded answers. Media outlets called for statements. One sponsor threatened to withdraw funding, saying, "We don't invest in arrogance. This moment has damaged everything you built." Inside their offices, the organizers argued bitterly. Some blamed the guard, others blamed poor planning, but deep down they knew the truth. The mistake was not only denying him, it was underestimating him. They had treated him as if he needed their stage, but now the world had seen that he was larger than their entire hall. Outside in the city, Keanu continued his life quietly. He did not give interviews. He did not defend himself. He did not point fingers. When reporters tried to ask him questions, he simply smiled and said, "I was grateful to spend time with the fans." That's all, but silence once again became his greatest weapon. His refusal to fuel the fire only made people admire him more. Commentators online wrote, "He does not need to explain." His actions spoke louder than anything. Then something unexpected happened. Across the country, people began to gather in small groups, holding signs with messages like "Kindness is strength" and "Humility is power." These gatherings were not protests, they were celebrations. Strangers came together in parks and public spaces, inspired by what they had seen. One evening, in a small town square, a young woman held up her phone and spoke into a live stream. "This isn't about a movie star anymore. It's about us. It's about remembering that respect and kindness matter more than status." Behind her, dozens of people clapped and cheered. The organizers of the luxury event watched in horror as the story slipped further from their grasp. What was supposed to be a night of glitter had turned into a lesson the whole world embraced. They could no longer hide it, no longer control it. Keanu's silence had grown into something no one could contain. The final silence days passed, but the story refused to fade. What had started as a single mistake at a luxury event had grown into something that touched millions. In coffee shops, strangers talked about it. In classrooms, teachers told students about the lesson of humility. In homes across the world, families sat together and watched the clips again, their hearts warmed by a man who chose kindness over pride. The organizers of the event, desperate to save their reputation, finally held a press conference. Under the glare of cameras, they apologized. They admitted their mistake, promising it would never happen again. But even as they spoke, it was clear the damage was done. No one cared about their excuses. People only cared about the image of Keanu Reeves standing quietly among ordinary fans, smiling in the face of disrespect. Offers poured in for interviews. Magazines wanted exclusive stories. Networks begged for appearances. But Keanu declined them all. Instead, he stayed true to the same silence that had defined that night. When asked why, he gave only one reply: "The story is not about me, it's about the people. They are the reason I stayed." That simple answer spread even further, striking hearts around the world. It was no longer just about a famous actor. It was about the truth that humility can outshine arrogance, that kindness can silence cruelty, and that respect is not something earned by wealth, but by how you treat others. One evening, a candlelight gathering was held in a city park. Hundreds came together holding small lights in their hands. They spoke not of films or fame, but of dignity and kindness. On a large screen, clips from that night played: the moment with the boy and his notebook, the moment with the elderly man, the moment with the children. The crowd wept softly, united not in sadness but in inspiration. Keanu was not there. He did not need to be. His silence was already present in every face, every smile, every tear. By the end of the week, newspapers across the world carried the same message. Sometimes the loudest lesson is taught without words. And so, what began as humiliation at a closed door became something no one could have predicted. A movement of respect, a reminder of humility, and a story of kindness that would be told again and again. Keanu never raised his voice. He never demanded justice. He never sought revenge. Yet through silence, he gave the world a lesson that echoed louder than any speech ever could. Weeks turned into months, yet the memory of that night did not fade. What was supposed to be just another luxury gathering had transformed into a story retold in classrooms, churches, mosques, workplaces, and homes across the world. It was no longer about being denied entry. It was about how one man responded to disrespect with humility, and how that response became a lesson for everyone. Students began writing essays about the moment, calling it the night humility won. Artists painted murals of Keanu with the fans, showing him kneeling to listen to a child or comforting an elderly man. One mural in particular, painted on the side of a busy street, showed him standing calmly outside the glowing doors, a crowd around him, while the caption below read, "Respect is not given by titles, it is earned by kindness." The organizers of the event faded into silence. Their names were forgotten, their power meaningless. The world did not remember their chandeliers, their music, or their speeches. All anyone remembered was the man outside who gave more value to strangers than the event gave to its honored guests. Years later, people still spoke of that night. Parents told their children, "When you feel disrespected, remember what Keanu did. He did not fight with anger, he did not shout, he chose dignity." Keanu himself never told the story. He never gave interviews about it, never wrote about it, never claimed to be a hero. He continued his life quietly, the same way he always had. Yet wherever he went, people carried the memory of that night in their hearts. And perhaps that was the most powerful part of it all. He never needed to explain, because the silence had already spoken louder than any explanation could. The boy David, who had once handed Keanu his notebook, grew older and became an artist. In interviews, when asked what inspired him to keep going, he always said, "A kind man once told me not to stop drawing. I listened." The elderly man who had spoken of his late wife said later to his children, "That night, I felt her presence. And it was because of him." From one quiet act of dignity, ripples spread across generations. In the end, the story was not about a luxury event. It was not about doors being opened or closed. It was about the lesson that dignity cannot be denied, that kindness cannot be silenced, and that respect is not a gift of power. It is the gift of humility.